If you're a woman working in corporate right now, and maybe a woman working in specifically male-dominated industries, and you're finding it challenging, you're going to love this podcast today with my amazing friend, Sinja Hallam. Sinja is a transformational coach with an MBA who has worked in change management for many, many years. And she now coaches women who are wanting to step up into their leadership. We've had great conversations. Do women really support women, or is there another agenda going on? We talk about burnout, and we talk about burnout and menopause. It's a wonderful conversation, and I can't wait for you to listen to it. Here we go. Here's my conversation with Sinja Hallam. Welcome to the Midlife Reimagined Podcast. It is my absolute delight today to have my guest is Sinja Hallam, all the way from South Australia. There's one thing about the Midlife Reimagined Podcast. There's plenty of accents on this podcast. But before I introduce Sinja and we'll chat to her, I just want to share a little bit of her bio because it's extraordinary. She's an ICF certified leadership and executive coach, keynote speaker and published author. She helps leaders rise with clarity, confidence, calm and heart. Love that. Her clients include Fortune 100 CEOs, senior and emerging leaders, and she specializes in high achieving women navigating life and careers in male dominated environments. I want to get into that too. She draws on her own resilience and lived experience to empower others to lead authentically, create real impact, and have a legacy they are proud of. She's also a Women Changing the World Global Award winner and an APAC Region Coach of the Year Award winner too. Welcome, Sinja.
Thank you so much, Sally, for having me on your podcast. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, yeah. So Sinja and I met in Vancouver October last year, I think. Maybe when you were here, was it October?
It was November.
November
Yeah.
last year at the Women Changing the World Awards, and we kind of just gelled. Like we just had so many lovely conversations, and I just couldn't wait to have Sinja on the podcast. So, Sinja, tell me about your business and how you ended up doing what you do now, coaching women in male-dominated industries in particular.
Ha, Sally, we could talk about that for hours, so I'll actually try and keep it quite short. So the reason why I'm doing my business today is I grew my career for 25 plus years in organizational change management in large corporate environments. So imagine putting in new systems or mergers and acquisitions or changing processes for people. So whatever is changing in the organization, that's the thing that I used to deal with. And people don't like change. Doing it in a male-dominant environment, sometimes in field work. So this is working in the Australian Strzelecki Desert, implementing a new warehouse system. You can imagine if people have been doing things for 25 years one way, which is manually on a spreadsheet, and all of a sudden you're implementing a system that there might be some resistance to using a system, or people doubt whether they can do the thing that you're asking them to do with a new system, that they can learn it, they feel unproductive, they feel scared about what's going to happen and how will they be replaced perhaps with a system, and no guarantees that they are not going to be replaced by a system will relay that fear. So that's what I used to work with. I used to work with people that felt these things and teach them how to use new systems. Teach them how to adopt the change and become comfortable using the new things and then proficient at it. So that was my job. And then I noticed that when I was working in these environments, that it took me much longer as a woman in either an oil and gas field or a mining field or even a chemical company to actually grow my career. I always felt like I had to work twice as hard to be in the room and then 3 times as hard to stay there. And then I thought, when I transitioned from working in corporate into my own business, the reason for doing that is to help others not take so long. Because I found that when we are working in male-dominant environment, it really pays for us to be in the positions of influence where we can help make the decisions that are currently being made for us, right? And so if we can influence those decisions and help make those decisions for us instead of having them made for us, we can change the world.
Yeah.
And that's why I do what I do.
Yeah. So how did you end up working in oil and gas because I can tell your accent's not from Australia either. But how did you end up working in the oil and gas and mining industries in the desert in Australia? How did that happen?
Well, that is another story in itself, but I was born in Germany. And my parents left Germany when I was 3 years old to go to South Africa. So I grew up in South Africa. And in South Africa, my real first job was as professional ballerina for a South African ballet company that actually no longer exists, which is unfortunate. But that's what my first job was. And then my parents said to me one day, we don't actually think that this ballerina thing is a proper job, and we think that you should actually consider going to university, given that we've given you all of this education for all of these years. So it's like you kind of feel a little bit obligated. I did see their point, and I didn't actually. So I had the contract for the being a ballerina in my hand, and I signed the contract. And then I had my parents' voice in my head. And the obligation then became bigger than the dream that I had. And I don't regret it at all. I've never regretted it. But I tore the contract up, and so I never actually started my career as a professional ballerina. But I was there in the training camps to actually be selected, and so it was, I had the contract, I signed the contract. I can say that I made it into a company, which not many people can. And then after that, I was quite okay to pursue what my parents thought would be a better opportunity for myself, which was go to university. I didn't do well at university. I kind of was lost. And then I met a boy and came to Australia, and that kind of didn't last very long either. And I had to make the decision on whether I stay in Australia or whether I go back to South Africa. And after 2 years, I went back to South Africa to make that decision, and I decided that my life was going to be a lot better for myself. I can create my life in Australia versus having to meet a few obstacles if I had to go back to South Africa. So I thought the obstacles are easier in Australia than they are in South Africa. And when I then started my career here, 2 years later, I met my current husband, and my current husband encouraged me to go back to university. I did my MBA, and my very first job after my MBA was at a steel company. And from the steel company, I just continued going into a mining company, and from the mining company, I ended up in an oil and gas company. And what my superpower was understanding the logistical processes behind that. So the most expensive thing in oil and gas mining is actually not the mining in itself, it's the logistics of getting people backwards and forwards, food backwards and forwards, housing backwards and forwards into remote locations. And I understood how that process worked from a systems perspective. And that's the knowledge and the expertise that I've brought to these environments, and then also really understood how humans interacted with the system and how humans also interact with change. They don't like it. And so I became skilled at helping humans in remote environments adapt to change.
Yeah, that's amazing, because for those of listening, Australia exists around the bottom and a little bit up the sides, and then everything else in the middle is hot, dry, and a difficult environment to actually live in. I know in Australia there's a great fly in, fly out, industry. I personally know somebody who does fly. I think she's 2.5 weeks away and 2.5 weeks home. But I mean, it is a challenging industry. From what I can gather, from what I've seen, it makes people kind of tough. So
it is a tough environment to work in. I think the hottest day that I had in the desert when I was working for the oil and gas company was 56 degrees. It's warm, and at the same time in the evenings it's cold, and then when you're up there in winter it's also freezing. There's no snow obviously, but it is cold in the evenings, and you do need a lot of warm clothing if you're going to be working at night. But the environment in itself is challenging, especially when it's warm, and then there's not a lot of tree or shade around either. Lots of red sand, and if there's a dust storm that sweeps through, you've not only got the heat, but then you've got your personal exfoliator, the red desert sand.
I just want to clarify for our American listeners, we're talking 56 degrees centigrade, not Fahrenheit. 56 degrees centigrade, like that's almost inhumane, having to work and live in environment like that. So you were working for and creating, helping implement strategies to change. So when you decided to go into coaching for, as you do, what was the catalyst for that for you? What was the decision? Where did that come from? For okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to go and launch my, because coaching's tough to start with. I mean, you become somebody that's used to getting a paycheck, used to systems showing up a certain time, and then you go into kind of entrepreneurship because that's what you are as a coach. What was the decision? What made you change and kind of pivot, I guess?
And leave my well-paying corporate career for entrepreneurship, yes, which is a roller coaster ride in itself. The catalyst was burning out twice. So it creeps up on you. It really is not something that you wake up one day and realize that you burnt out, right? It slowly creeps up on you. And it's insidious in that manner. It's like you don't notice it. But how I did begin noticing it is in one of my last jobs that I had. It was actually in New Zealand. I had lost my job in the oil and gas industry because I was a contractor and the price had fallen, the oil and gas price had fallen. So my job became unviable in the company. And because I'd lost my job, I needed another one. And it was hard to find a similarly large project to work on in Adelaide. So my husband and I started looking further afield, and we ended up both with fairly large projects in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, I burned out. And what happened was that I started working for a company, and I was working probably 80-hour weeks, and I was doing that for a very long time. And it was the norm. I had nothing else to do. I didn't know anybody in a new country, and so I was just working. And eventually one day I started noticing that I felt really anxious. Like when I woke up in the morning, I felt ill, like nauseous, and I couldn't explain why. And it's not that I didn't like going to work, or I just had this real anxious feeling. And then I also noticed that on that day, I started paying attention to not only how my body was feeling, but how my mind was working. And I couldn't follow a conversation in a meeting. I just noticed that it was a simple thing. It's like, how can I not understand what people are saying? Why is my brain not following this conversation? And the other thing that I started noticing was that my concentration kept lapsing. So when I started reading things, I would have to read the same sentence over and over again. And I couldn't remember what the sentence before was. And so it felt like I was starting the same page numerous times to read the first. And I thought, this is not something that's normal. And over time, that kind of increased. And then eventually I sat in a meeting where I thought, I'm actually going to break down. If I have another one of these meetings, I'm actually literally going to lose the plot in front of a lot of people. And I can't afford to do that for my career's sake, right? And my reputation's sake. And there was a whole heap of stuff attached to that. And so I thought the best course of action for me is to cancel the next meeting and see if I can find something that we call in Australia is EAP, so Employee Assistance Program. And you can, in New Zealand, they have the same. And so you can find a counsellor, psychologist, or a psychiatrist for yourself and have a chat to them on the company. You don't need to tell anybody. You can just do that. And I thought, well, this would be the best course of action for me to do. Luckily, I found a person that from their image on screen, I was able to connect to. I thought, this looks like a kind man. I think I can go and have a conversation with this person, because one of the things that I really needed and lacked at the time was kindness, understanding, empathy, right? And it was not part of the equation of where I was working. And so I went to see this guy and I said to him, I don't know if I'm going crazy. I think I might be going crazy. And I think I also perhaps am starting to have anxiety. I don't know. And I don't know how to control or manage it. And so at the end of the session, he actually said, you're not broken. What's happened is that your mind is so reactive. You've been pressed against a wall for such a long time that you actually don't have any creative thought processes. So what we're going to do if you agree, over a period of 6 sessions is do mindfulness. Mindfulness, I thought, whatever, mindfulness, I don't know how this is going to work, right? But I'm going to give it a go because something has to change. And so let's go and give mindfulness a go. And wow, I did not know that 6 sessions, 6 hours essentially of coaching would change my outlook on life. And literally, I have this man to thank for the career that I'm now pursuing as a result of what he did with me in those 6 sessions, and the empowerment that it gave me to think creatively again, and what that creative thought process then generated. And from that generation, what I was then able to stand up for myself over the last 4 years. So yeah, this is my 5th year in business. So on the 11th of November this year, I'll be 5 years in business. I'll celebrate that milestone. And yeah, those 5 years have been just, pursuing my dreams and my heart. Feels like being a ballerina again, and like not having given it up, if that makes sense. All vastly different, like dancing on your toes and talking to people. It is just like that. It's like pursuing a dream and going, yeah, this is what I was meant to do. This is what I was put on this earth to do.
Fantastic. I want to go back to something you just said a minute ago, that you didn't have a space for kindness or empathy in the organization. Was that part of like I can, I often see with women in corporate, they put on an armor. Like you got to kind of put this armor on that you are strong and tough like everybody else. Is that predominate? Do you see that in male dominated industries where women have to be kind of mindful, if I want to use of not expressing too much emotion, but being stoic? And was that part of your breakdown, do you think?
I think it's much bigger than that, Sally. So I think in corporate, what happens is that there's pressures, and those pressures turn into, return on investment, ROI, results companies need, right? And so when you are producing those results, or responsible for producing those results, and then accountable for them as well, there is pace that sits behind that. And then there is understanding that if I say no to some of these things that I should be saying no to, perhaps that has a negative impact on my career. So you take on more. And for some, I feel that we've become unsustainable in our ways of working. And therefore, we are going to struggle with a younger generation pipeline into corporate if we're not very careful with how we use emotional intelligence in leadership to connect back to not only the brain, but also the heart. And I found that the harder things get in an organization, people feel that you can't have kindness and be tough at the same time. And that's especially true for women, because in male-dominant environments, you are observing what success looks like in general for men, right? And then you tread a fine line between being assertive or aggressive in some instances, or being too soft and too kind and not effective, right? And so it is a fine line, and that tightrope, walking that tightrope is quite challenging for a woman if you don't have role models that are like you.
Yes.
If you can't become it. So when I was in the environments that I was working in, mostly, I was usually one of the very few women in the room. Unlike some women, I've always had the idea that you lend a hand up to others, but I wasn't always proficient at doing it, because it takes you so long to be in the room. It takes you even longer to stay in the room. And therefore, what sometimes can happen is that women shut the door on others that come up behind them. So it took me a long time to get here. Now I'm not going to have that taken away from me.
Yeah.
Right. And you can understand the hard work that sits behind that. But then there's also this toughness, this armor that you talk about that comes with that. And I think that then doesn't help the people that are following from a perspective. So
I see that a lot. Yeah, I see that a lot actually now with having young daughters who are in their 30s. And we've had lots of discussions about that they'll look to a woman who's a mentor further up the ladder, only to find that no. And it's like exactly what you said. It's like, oh no, I had to work too hard to get here. You're going to have to too. And I think that's really one of the things that I presented on leadership a couple of years ago at a conference. And that was one of the things that I discovered in the research was that, in fact, women at the top are not really good at mentoring younger women coming through. It's like this, it's an isolated space that they've got to hold as well. And it surprised me, actually, because I just thought women would naturally, because women are natural nurturers, but in order to survive, as you were just explaining, they have to be somebody different. I wanted just to circle back a little bit because I want to know, while this was all going on, were you kind of looking back on now going through perimenopause or menopause at this time? Like, was this part of the stages you were going through, do you think, of that?
When I burned out, when I look back, yes, but I didn't recognize it at the time because you don't sort of realize that there is a lot of hormonal change when you are in 40s. And as I was looking back and recognizing some of the symptoms that I had, anxiousness is one of them. And so it's like I couldn't decide, was I being made anxious by the work and the pace of work that I was doing and the long hours that I was doing, plus the responsibility that was weighing on my shoulders. And let's just be clear, I had 116 projects that I was dealing with at the time from an organizational change management perspective. That was a portfolio of work for a particular part of this organization. And every time we made a change somewhere, this would get added to the list. At the same time, I had 30 of those projects, 30 were transformational. Transformational projects require one change manager per project. I was one person with a change manager helping me, right? So the portfolio change manager and the change manager, we had 116 projects between us. We had to figure out how we work this. And the people that we were affecting were in the around about 5,000 every time we changed something. So it was significant change. And then at this particular point in time, when you feel that responsibility and going, things are not going so well, or I am stretched too thin, and I understand that I'm wanting to function, and that's why I'm working the many hours. But at the same time, I'm also recognizing that I might not be adding the value that I want to add because I'm spread so thin. And so you start questioning yourself. It's like, is it because I can't work fast? Is it because I'm like, am I too anxious? And then the anxiousness increases as you recognize that you're not adding the value that you want. And so it really was quite the mental load that I was carrying at the time and questioning myself.
I mean, isn't that interesting? I'm questioning why you're telling me this story, because I see a lot of women do that. We take on a lot. Like, it's almost like, okay, yes, of course I can. And the more you say you can, the more they give you, right? And I'm in awe of what you're telling me, because 5,000 people, 116, my God, I mean, no wonder you stop being out. I mean, the brain just can't function with that. And then questioning yourself, am I good enough? Am I worthy enough? Am I, like, it must have been this. I think women in particular do this, where we have this script running in our heads continuously. Am I doing enough? Can I do it better? No matter whether it's raising children or showing up in corporate, we do have this script that sits in the back of our minds. I wanted to circle around a little bit, because the work that you do now is, you have this power to transform, is that your business now in your coaching. Tell me what that's all about, and how you bring your experience of that to coaching these women working in mostly male-dominated industries, from what I can gather. What do you want to share with them? What's the message that you are trying to share with these women based on your own experience, and an MBA and a coaching qualification? I mean, and a ballerina, overachiever. That's all I can say.
It's many years, Sally, right? Many years to change and transformation.
Yeah, I think we're one overachiever to another. Bloody hell. Anyway, what at your core, what is it that you want the message for women leaders in particular, and how you coach them through this?
So when I was, in this predicament, like I've just explained, I looked to the outside. Change and transformation happens on the inside and on the outside. And I was looking to the outside because I was working with others and working for others, right? I wasn't really focusing on myself. And I came last in all of this equation, essentially, because, everybody wakes up with good intentions. And my intentions was to help others through change every day, right? People find themselves at crossroads, change is challenging. And so my good intention was, I'm going to help others through this process. I understand how this process works. And so I'm going to help people through it. And it was all about serving. And so I served others, but I didn't serve myself. And the power to transform actually comes from within.
Yes.
And so if you want to have an effect on the outside, you have to start on the inside. And I like to call it the power to transform begins with heart, right? And so bring the heart back into the things that you do, the things that you love, and start serving, doing that thing that you love from a full cup, not an empty cup. Because when you have a full cup, you have way more capacity to help others. And I didn't recognize that at the time. So my cup was so empty, and I was still trying to serve and still waking up with good intentions and recognizing that I just didn't have a lot more to give. I was just so reactive to everything. And then when I started going to those EAP sessions, and the mindfulness started from within, like noticing how the body felt, noticing what my mind was doing, noticing the stories that I was telling myself. And like you become so used to some of these things that they are subconscious that you don't actually question them anymore. And I started questioning everything as a result. So everything that I thought, everything that I said to myself. And when I realized that power to change is actually a choice, everything I choose or not choose to do is going to change something, right? And so if I choose not to do it, it's going to have an effect. What's that impact? And then is that the impact that I want to have on the world, or is there a different legacy that I want to leave? And so asking myself these questions, what's the legacy that I want to leave? What's the impact that I want to have in the world? That started looking at me from the inside. And there was a whole heap of work that I had to do for myself, which is understanding that the stories that you tell yourself, right? Am I good enough? Am I worthy enough? Do I have to say yes to everything to have a successful career? If I say no, is the world going to break down, right? And all of those types of things. And you just have to start questioning those things for yourself, and then do the work necessary to change those stories. And so this is a journey that I'm on. And it's a lifelong journey. There is no destination. It is just recognizing when you look back, oh, look how far I've come.
Yes.
But there is so many more things that I want to do. So when you're talking about, midlife and is perimenopause and menopause the end of life? No, you can still do the thing that you want to do and have dreamt about, if you allow yourself to dream big again, which I didn't. I was dreaming really small when I recognized it. And so allowing myself to dream big and go, this is my time, and my time's not over, and there's still so many things that I can do, and there's still so much I have to give and serve. Like, why not follow my biggest dream? And what does my biggest dream look like? And so that is now the thing that I do to help others realize much quicker. And I know you and I as mums, right, we get stuck in this and going, we give everything to everybody else. And I know you're a new grandmother as well. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Bringing up the new generation, right, is like, why do they have to go through this world the same way we did and take just as long, right? Why not short circuit that? And so this is the thing that I call lend a hand up, right? Lending a hand up means that you shorten that path for them, and also start talking about the things that perhaps weren't spoken about when you and I grew up, and therefore sharing the experiences of perimenopause and menopause and what that really is like, and what it means for a woman in corporate when you're having a hot flush and sitting in a meeting and you're literally trying not to move because any millimeter movement of anything is going to make you sweat and need a towel to dry off, right? And so you're sitting in these meetings going, oh my God, I can't say anything, and please don't ask what's happening to me right now, because I just want to sit very still here and not move.
Exactly. I tell the story, actually, one of these things I tell a story in the book about brain fog. That was the biggest thing for me, because similar to you, I was doing too much, and I couldn't think anymore, and I was exhausted. But I remember this day in this meeting, and because I left my fitness industry job for a couple of reasons, and I went and worked in a school as the marketing coordinator, an event manager, and I was sitting in the board meeting with 8 middle-aged men with white hair, and they asked me a question. So what's the next marketing strategy? And I just looked at them and just burst into tears. And they, like, nothing says, what the hell's wrong with this woman? Then tears rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. I just went blank. And it was like this kind of the demeanor, that we put on, I want to be professional and I want to know what I'm talking about. And especially when you're in a board meeting with men and you're presenting things out of the box, right? And I love what you said there about getting to the stories we tell ourselves. Because it does, we said before, like it runs like a script. I think, do you find a lot of women experience imposter syndrome in the roles that they're doing?
And I hear it in every single coaching conversation that I have, right? And just to be clear, all of my business is focused on women, but I do attract men as well. So it's really strange. My marketing is all directly to females in male-dominant environments, yet my business is 52% men as well. And what they really want from this is to be able to connect back to their heart, as I call it, right? And so it's the heart-brain connection that they are looking for. So I'm not saying that men are unempathetic. That's not what I'm saying. I'm also not saying that they don't have emotional intelligence, but sometimes you feel that you have to give it up.
Yes. And I've said so many times, we need more heart-centered leaders. My gosh, there's a lot of ego around the world with their finger on a button to start a war somewhere. Like you could, and what I find, there's so many women step up into the, and they become like a man. We don't want that. The two styles work well together, but you see that a lot with women who expect that, I've got to be tough and I've got to say the right thing. And what we're actually looking for is heart-centered leaders, people that connect.
Totally. And so it's stepping back into what I call your authenticity, right? So your authentic leadership style. And if your authentic leadership style, there's many researchers out there that say there's 4 styles or there's 6 styles or whatever. There is so many styles as so many leaders we have, right? Everybody has a unique leadership style. And yes, you can box them into certain different categories, but I'm also finding that those old leadership styles actually don't resonate with the younger generation. And so we have to figure out how, as heart-centered leaders, become the bridge between the older generation and the younger generation. And I see myself as this bridge, right? Is understanding that as a heart-centered leader, you do not have to be and or, you can be both. So you don't have to be harsh to lead in a tough situation. You can be really kind and lead in a tough situation. And if that is how that makes you feel strong, you're going to be a stronger leader for it, right? People are going to resonate with that more. And so you have to find what works for you, not what you copied from somebody else. And this is where I like to call stay in your own lane. Your own lane means that you are not measuring your success against somebody else's to the left or to the right of you, because you don't know how they got to where they got to, right? And so if you're comparing yourselves to them, then you're only always going to end up with less than or feel less than. Whereas everybody has a unique journey to get to a certain point in time, and the story of how you got there matters. That story will help another person. You have to find the other people. So if you're going to hide yourself, if you're going to become the best kept secret, right? This is where you can't help people, then you can't serve from that place. You have to figure out how you, as an authentic leader, become visible. And so I think that for some women, that is courage. And that's where the imposter syndrome comes in, right? And so men and women have imposter syndrome, and some people, don't want to call it imposter syndrome because it's not something that can be medicated. So it's called perhaps imposter phenomenon is what I like to call it. It's just arrives, and usually what happens is it arrives when you're at the edge of a growth zone. So, it's usually come up and said, I'm just about to take a leap into something bigger. And I don't know if I can take that leap because I'm not ready. And so here's the 2 stories, right? I want to take the leap, but I don't know if I'm ready, and I don't know if I'm good enough. And so I'm just going to step back, and oh my gosh, I look at the other 2 people on the left and on the right of me, and they are way better at it than I am. And so maybe I need to wait. And so that story stops so many women from taking the leap that they need to take. That imposter needs to be learned how to be managed. And there's a few other saboteurs that people have that I work with. And then it's about unpicking the stories that each one of them tells you. And then go, okay, now how do you feel the fear and do it anyway, knowing that it's a growth zone and you're not going to be good when you start, but you have to start somewhere, right? And it's an entire cycle of life where I've got to have my first job, but I can't get my first job because I don't have experience. Somebody has to give you a go, and you have to give yourself permission to give it a go too. When you get to certain stages in your leadership or in your career into certain positions, you also have to give yourself permission to go, I can go higher than this. And I'm going to give myself permission to take that leap of faith. And then I'm also going to give myself that permission to have a beginner's mindset and know that I'm not going to be good the day I start. I'm going to get good over time.
Yeah. We have a theme in our house: say yes and then figure it out later. It's the opportunity. Say yes.
Richard Branson
figure it out.
If somebody gives you an opportunity, and figure out how you do it later.
But it's so true. If you look at the successful people in the world, they're not afraid to fail, number one. They're not afraid to ask for help, number two. And I think, when we're talking about women in particular, I think we get trapped in this, I'm not good enough. I'm not, this little box, as if we don't expect our children to learn how to walk the first day. And if they fall down and bump their heads, we encourage them to get up again. And somewhere along the way, that's become, I don't know, in our heads, I'm not good at this. I'm not. And I know for many women is that you were just talking about, they get to a point where they're offered something bigger and then all the limiting beliefs come up. Like, to me, that's, okay, you're ready for the next growth, because if you're staying where you are, you get frustrated. Okay, I spend a lot of time in the gym, and when you're working, like, the last rep is always really hard. Can I do this? Can I do this without dropping this thing on my foot? That's growth. That's where the growth happens. That's those little tears in the muscle. So it's like everything is like that last part. It's the hardest, and you just got to push through it. We're running out of time, but I want to get onto a couple of questions because you added so many impactful things to this. I want to get quickly to, what was your menopause experience like? Because I feel in your role, you've had to go through all of this while you're managing your symptoms of menopause. Do you feel like you were, most women don't know they're in perimenopause. Up until recently, nobody kind of knew what it was. But what was the things, do you think, for you that were the most challenging part of the hot flashes of this menopause transition while you were trying to go through all this change management and managing people? For you, what was the hardest?
Well, the hot flashes were a thing, right? And so they just kept increasing. But what I also really felt was the brain fog that you spoke about, the inability to concentrate. And I was just thinking that was coming from the overwhelm, right? But there is you can deal with it once you know that it is actually brain fog. Nutrition perspective, you can, and supplementation perspective, you can deal with it. You do not need necessarily hormone replacement therapy to deal with the brain fog.
Yeah.
So, but once I dealt with that, it was like, oh my gosh, I can see clearly now. Wow, made a big difference. The other challenging part that I had was, people don't like talking about it, but I will share it, is I had polycystic breast syndrome. So my breasts were constantly painful. Like I barely wanted to move or touch them or even do exercises as a result. That would have been an indicator had I paid attention to it as an indicator. I didn't, and was just, like the cycles that you go through, the menstrual cycles that you go through. And I just thought it was part of that. And so I didn't do anything about it for a very long time, but there's definitely something that you can do about that too. I think that the difficulty that we have is that people don't like talking about perimenopausal symptoms, and especially not at work, right? Yeah. And so women go through this feeling fairly isolated.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a thing that 50% of the population has to go through. So what can we do to make it easier for women in corporate that feel that when they get to this stage that they are no longer useful, or they feel too self-conscious mentioning that, and therefore choose to leave the career versus stay, right? And so what can we do in corporate to actually help this font of knowledge stay versus leave? And I think there's many things that could be done. And so the challenge that I had is that I didn't have that accepted during my career. And I wish that it was accepted for others. I wish it was already in existence. And I know people are working towards it. There's organizations that are making many inroads into this to help women survive it, I guess, with it on the other end in a corporate career versus feeling like they have to give it up because they're overwhelmed, the brain fog, all of those things are just preventing them from being effective.
Yeah, and the cost to the economy is huge. When you go through perimenopause and menopause, the cost, the presenteeism, where they're there but they're not really there, just the amount of time they have to take off often for doctor's appointments, specialist appointments, it comes out of their, vacation when they don't have the sick. I mean, it's enormous cost. And one of the things that costs 213% of a woman's salary to replace this incredible wisdom. So, as you said, I mean, it's an important conversation to have at this stage, because we can't afford to lose this brain drain. The menopausalization issue, so many women that I've spoken to and worked with get to a point where they're all of a sudden being overlooked for advancement, career. A client recently, wonderful sales trainer, fantastic, rose to the top of every business career she was ever in, and because she's 60 something doesn't even get a look in, but nothing, no, so I think that's got to change. I'm going to leave because I want to ask you this question. If you could go back to your 30-year-old self, whether you were in the outback New South Wales or South Australia, what would you tell her now? If you could sit down and have a conversation with your 30-year-old self, what would you tell her?
To have the courage to ask for the things that you want and the things that you need. That's what I would tell her, because I waited to be noticed. I worked my butt off to be noticed, to be promoted. And what I know to be true now is that I observed my male counterparts advance their career much faster because they asked for the next step. They put themselves forward, right? And we as women don't necessarily do that for ourselves. So my 30-year-old self would now know to work hard, but also put yourself forward, make yourself visible and have those conversations about the value that you bring to the role, to the things that you do, and that you do well, right? And point them out. And so it's not to shy away from making yourself visible because it's coming from a place of ego. It's not coming from a place of ego. Visibility is a strategy, right? And visibility, you need visibility to be able to help others also see you as a leader and become that role model. If you're going to be the best kept secret, you can't do that. Visibility is the biggest part of that. And so my 30-year-old self would be step into your visibility, not when you're 58. Step into visibility when you're 30.
I love that. Visibility is a strategy. I love that. It is. And I think that, I mean, I'm resonating with everything you're saying. I wish I could tell my 30-year-old self that, who was just, trying to hold it all together. Don't, for goodness ever, ask for help. Oh my God, that could be just something, it means you can't cope. And the things that we sort of brought across from that generation of our mothers. And when I look back at my mother and, 5 kids, working full time, I mean, honestly, really, I mean, just, and one day she said, I think I need a cleaner. It took her years to decide to get a cleaner, and I think that's a little bit of that carry on. Sinja, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I have loved this. Your knowledge and your experience is just wonderful. And in the show notes, I'll put links to Sinja's, how you can get in touch with her if you want to go to the next level in your leadership you're in a corporate environment and there's more. So Sinja's the woman to be talking to. Thank you so much, Sinja. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon. I think we should have part 2.
Thank you so much, Sally. And I would love part 2.
Okay. All right, Sinja, thank you so much. Bye for now. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Midlife Reimagined Life Beyond Menopause podcast as much as I do. I love hearing the stories of these women who are reimagining their lives and really stepping to their own power at this stage in their life. Please remember to subscribe so you stay up to date for a new episode every week. And please share this with somebody you know who may need a little bit of inspiration around truly living her life post-menopause. I'll see you next week.